Hello and welcome to Just One More Watch. Welcome today to my first encounter with a brand I've been looking forward to reviewing for years, Zodiac. While we're here, this video is sponsored by Zodiac/Fossil Group. Zodiac, like Doxa, like Oleg and Weiss, like Smiths, like so many other brands that I have reviewed over the past few years, is a Phoenix brand. They've been making watches in Switzerland since 1882, ran into a little difficulty, shall we say, during the quartz crisis and went out of business in the early 1970s, but the name was resurrected by Fossil 10 years ago, along with a fabulous back catalogue. The one that always caught my eye was the Super Seawolf. Classic 4020 retro reissue available in a couple of traditional colour variants and a couple of more modern colour variants, shall we say. There is also a GMT version of that using exactly the same case. Again, traditional or modern depending on your preference. Now, they got in touch with me about 6 months ago saying they were launching a new World Time Bezel version of that GMT. Would I be interested? And I said, yes, please. It looks like they've sent out a few more pieces to Oleg at 24 hours at a time, Don Evans at Watch Report, and so on. So be sure to check out their videos if you're interested in one of these. 500 pieces of two different colours. There's a white dial red bezel version and a slightly more sober grey dial black bezel variant. That's the one I've got here today. What do I think of it? Well, if I told you that, you wouldn't watch the rest of the video, would you? Suffice to say, I think it's very attractive and very wearable. I do have 3 niggles and 1 moan though, so be sure to stick around for them. Let's flip the camera and get on with it. One thing I will not be complaining about today though is the packaging. All very nice indeed. There's an outer box, that's a kind of hinged lid, all very lush with a lovely little World Time polishing cloth there, and not 1, not 2, but 3 instruction manuals, all of which can be ignored. Well, actually they might be useful to teach you how to set the thing, but then the packaging should be nice given the price. $1,795 US, including free shipping direct from the manufacturer. Not the cheapest Swiss made GMT watch on the market, but broadly in line with the Christopher Ward World Time GMT, and a chunk cheaper than the Oris Aquis GMT. I reckon that's the 2 reference points for this one today. And as I said, I think it is a good looking watch. It's busy, there's a lot going on, but I think they've left enough space on the dial to give everything a bit of room to breathe. I think it all just works as a design, and a great set of dimensions and proportions. 40mm in diameter across the bezel anyway. The case actually measures at 39, so it's a little bit lighter on wrist than you would expect from a 40. 13.5mm thick, 47.5 lug to lug, 20mm lug width, cracking vintage taper all the way down to under 16, back up to just over 18 at the clasp, sized up for me, 7-inch wrist. This weighs in at 139 grams. That is spot on for a retro diver. So all stainless steel construction, case, crown, stainless steel bezel and full stainless steel bracelet. Now it's a quick release bracelet with solid links, solid end links. These are just pin and collar systems though. It's one of these full rivet style, if you see what I mean. I think very much in keeping with the watch, but I will circle back to the bracelet a bit later on. Security fold over here. It's a proper milled clasp with milled scissor and 4 holes of micro adjust. As I said, this is my first Zodiac, but from what I gather, this is the same case they use on all of the non-World Timer GMTs. It's a kind of similar case for a number of their different watches. Very much in keeping with that late 60s, early 70s skin diver-esque style, quite angular and unguarded crown there. As you can see, we have a vertical brush on the side of the case, longitudinal brush on the upper lug surface, flat ends to those lugs, and a little high polished chamfer. Zodiac logo on the crown there, crown perhaps a little small. That will be appearing later on. No complaints about that bezel though. The bezel action is fantastic. 24 click bi-directional GMT bezel, just what you'd want from either a GMT or a World Timer, and yeah, very, very satisfying action. It's not one of these bezels you're going to be incessantly fiddling with unless you are genuinely trying to work out what the time is around the world, but when you do fiddle with it, it'll be fun. That didn't sound too good, did it? And it's a very nice piece of glass as well. Boxed double dome sapphire crystal with plenty of anti-reflective undercoating. This style of retro watch you can always forgive a little bit of flecto and a bit of light play. This one is actually very nicely legible regardless of the viewing angle. Case back's pretty simple. Brushed in the middle, high polish around the outer edges there. Screw on helping with that 200 meters of advertised water resistance. Now high polish equals scratches, and as you can see this one has got a few scuffs and scratches on it already. Behind that case back though, it's another channel first, so first Zodiac, first Soprod. Or should that be Soprod, given that it's Swiss? Société de Production Horlogère is the name of the company, shortened to Soprod. They are a subsidiary of the Festina Group, so we've got Fossil Group watch with Festina Group movement in it. Apparently the C125 is a direct replacement in terms of size for the ETA 2893-2 and has very similar functionality. 25 joule hacking and hand winding, 42 hour power reserve and 28,800 vibrations per hour. High beat auto. There's a little bit of perlage apparently on the rotor, but I'm not going to crack the back on this one just to show you that. No complaints about how this one is running though. +6, +8 is fine, very healthy amplitude and negligible beat error. Let's go macro then and have a look at the dial and handset, and as I said earlier on, busy, but I think it gets away with it due to the amount of space on that dial. There's a lot going on, but the grey colour, beautiful grey sunburst colour, and I think it gives it a bit of space to breathe. Look, obviously a world timer bezel with all of that text on the bezel is going to look busier than the equivalent GMT just with Arabic, so that is a choice that you have to make if you're keen on this model. So printed dial, Zodiac logo, Zodiac name printed with Super Seawolf above the pinion, world, time and automatic, and then Swiss made printed beneath the pinion, all in white against that sunburst grey. Kind of vintage retro italic script for all of that verbiage as well. Applied indices though, and they're cracking 70s style. Slightly larger ones at the 12, the 6 and the 9. Now they're beveled, there's a brushed surface down the top and beveled high polish edges with a little rectangle of lume at the end of each one of those. I will show you the lume video shortly. Printed minute markers, and beyond that 1 to 24 printed for the GMT. Now there's a simple white date frame around the date complication at the 3 o'clock, and it's a simple handset. I think if they'd put a funkier, more angled, more complicated handset on there, it would have been over the top, but a nice simple set of stick style baton hands with a decent length of lume to each. The GMT hand is that bright vivid red one, if I needed to tell you, with another little bit of lume on the tip, and it's a paddle second hand today on this one also. And in keeping with the retro theme, it's quite a retro font they've used for that world timer bezel. Overall, I think they have nailed this one. I think it looks great. That's it on my 7-inch wrist. Looks great, wears great, wears very, very nicely indeed. 13.5, but it doesn't feel like that. It feels slimmer. There's a bit of protrusion from the case back, but it sits nice and flush. Inverted mid links of the end links always help. Lovely taper from that bracelet. Very nicely balanced, very nicely weighted. Legibility is okay, if not fantastic. I said those slightly small hands were a saving grace for giving the dial space to breathe, but they don't really help from this angle, and brushed silver hands against a grey sunburst dial was never going to win any competitions, but yeah, it still does okay. And if I move this one around a little in natural light, you can see what I mean. There is some interaction between the bezel insert and the sapphire crystal, but there's enough anti-reflective coating that you can still see those brushed silver hands from most angles. On wrist, great set of dimensions and proportions this one. A decent amount of angle down from the lugs really helps this one wear a treat. Great taper on the bracelet, nice weight to the clasp, 140 grams. This one just about spot on in terms of how it wears as well. So looks great, wears great, but I did say I had 3 niggles and 1 moan. What are the niggles then? Well, I talked about the crown earlier on. It's perhaps a little small and a little slippery, especially because, as noted, the bezel does protrude. You can't really get a fantastic grip on it, but that is fairly minor. It is a bit of a nitpick. Now, I haven't talked about the bezel insert. Not stated on their website, but as far as I can tell, that is K1 hardened mineral rather than sapphire. So the glass is sapphire, but the bezel insert is mineral, meaning if you give this one a good wallop off a wall or something, you're going to scrape that. That's not fantastic. I would much rather have seen sapphire and sapphire. Sapphire bezel inserts are more than commonplace, certainly at the price that Zodiac are asking for this one. They really should have matched the two of those, I think. And then there's the loom. If you're a regular on the channel, you know that I love my loom. If you're a regular on the channel, you know that if I haven't shown you the loom video to this point, it's because I'm going to complain about it. It looks okay initially, but when I turn up the speed, you can see that those indices, those little rectangles at the end of the applied silver markers, are gone by about 10 minutes. The hands, however, do a great job. GMT hand, not so much. The second hand really gets the gold star here, but the hour hand and minute hand are still doing well at the end of 20 minutes. But yeah, could have been better if those indices had had an extra couple of layers. But my biggest moan today involves the bracelet and the clasp. I mean, it looks good. I only wish it felt as good as it looks. It's not uncomfortable on wrist. It's a very comfortable, very nice fitting watch, but when you've got this one in hand, I just think it could do with a couple of revisions. Certainly nicely brushed, and I have no problem with that kind of full rivet style. With pin and collar system, again, I can't really complain about that given how much I adore my Oris 65, which has a pin and collar full rivet bracelet and not that great on the loom. But there's a few sharp edges here if you feel it that way. Lovely taper if you use all the links. However, if you have to take a couple of the links out, each of the individual links is tapered, so you end up with taper, 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 step. Now, they need to have a look at this. They need to change the way it tapers. It looks okay on one side, and if you have a big wrist and you're not taking out any links, it'll be fine, but there we are. Small taper, small taper, small taper, step. So yeah, it's a little bit awkward in reality if you have to take links out. And then there's the clasp. Again, it looks fantastic, nicely brushed, high polished brand logo there, chamfered edge around the top, which is kind of nicely matching to that circular logo. You've got a high polish on the edge, a little divot here, plenty of micro adjust, but in operation, it's just not that nice. It's one of these ones that you have to get your nail underneath it to release it. And what they've done is they have sharpened it massively. I mean, that is really quite sharp there. That is going to dig right under your nail and into your cuticle if you're not careful, and that is not a pleasant experience. And likewise, when this one is open, have a look at that top edge. That is pretty sharp also. Couple of sharp edges on the underside of it as well. Yeah, it's all right. You don't feel it when it's all closed over. You don't feel those sharp edges, but when you open the clasp, that is when you feel those sharp edges, and they don't feel good. And it's one of these clasps you're going to have to be careful taking this watch off. If I fold it over to secure it, there we are, you heard that click, a pronounced click with a second when I fold the security fold over. If, however, I release it, there you go. Both release at once. That has the potential to come straight off your wrist if your arm is at the wrong angle. And given that the bracelet is quick release, it might have been nice if they chucked in a Tropic or a Waffle or something. This thing is going to be a retro strap monster. All of those cross-stitch vintage leather straps that I just love. This thing will eat them for breakfast. A bonus one for $17.95 would not have gone astray. So what do I think of my first encounter with Zodiac then? Well, I think it looks absolutely fantastic, and it wears very, very nicely indeed. A proper 40-20 wears a treat on wrist. Fairly priced against the competition, if not a bargain, I would say, for a Swiss-made GMT. I guess it is a limited edition, which does offset that somewhat. A few tweaks here and there, though, would take this one to the next level. They wouldn't even have to do much to the bracelet, just replace that clasp with one that is a bit more user-friendly. So there you have it, you've made it to the end. I think that deserves a reward. Another Jomwa video. Check out the review of the Christopher Ward World Timer if you like this style, or the Oleg & Weiss P101 if you're after a retro reissue Phoenix watch. Thanks for watching this one. I'll see you again soon.